Hello, just doing a quick instructional video for a guildmate. This for you, Leo. He was asking some questions about how to play Ret Paladin. Uh, Paladin is a lot of fun to play if you know how to do it. Ret Paladin is pretty easy to play. It's not extraordinarily difficult. It's a very simple rotation. Uh, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have Seal of Truth up. And as far as your opening rotation goes, if you're up close to your target, you're going to want to open with Crusader Strike, and then you can do Judgment or Exorcism. That gives you 3 Holy Power to spend on your Templar's Verdict, Final Verdict, Divine Storm, whatever you're looking for. If you're far, a lot of folks will just, like, say, run up to the target, but I like to judge it, and then, do my ranged attacks while I'm moving up. It just depends on the fight, or, if you're doing PvE versus PvP. But that's pretty much the rotation. You're going to want to hit all your holy power builders first, and then you do your finisher. Of course, if you have your wings up, your priority is going to be Hammer of Wrath, and then pretty much whatever's on cooldown. Now, this is going to tie in with a talent later on, that every time you do any particular skill that was going to give you holy power, it does give you 3 charges of holy power, so you can hit like a finisher after every skill hit, which is really nice to have for your burst. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and look at the talent tree. The talents are pretty varied. Most of the time, a lot of folks will go ahead and stick with Long Arm of the Law for Retribution. This gives you a speed increase every time you judge, so you move a little bit faster. Now, sometimes when I'm just kind of goofing around, or if I'm running old dungeons or old raids or stuff, or transmog or mounts, I like to use Pursuit of Justice, as it does give you an inherent movement increase, and then it also gives you an extra increase per holy power that you have, up to 3 holy power. So you move statically at 15% faster, and then per holy power you will move an additional 15%, so that gives you a 30% speed increase. So that's pretty nice, especially when you're doing old stuff and you just want to kind of get through there and get out. That's your tier 15 or your level 15 talent. For your level 30 talent, I like to use Fist of Justice. It's a 30-second stun, or it's a 6-second stun on a 30-second cooldown, which is really nice to have, and it's an instant cast. So if you want to use Repentance, it does have a cast time. It is ranged, but any damage that the target takes is going to break that. So in PvP, because of the cast, you almost always don't want to do that, especially if you're playing Ret. Blinding Light, you will see some Holy Paladins take this. It isn't bad, but again, it's got a big cast time on there, so if... oh, hey, it's instant cast, actually. That's kind of cool. But it doesn't... it doesn't stick, so if they get damaged, it'll break that, so you don't want to have to deal with that too much. So Fist of Justice is usually the best thing to take. Your level 45 talent, this one's debatable. As Retribution, you're probably not going to want to use Eternal Flame. For Holy, that's not a bad skill to have. It's pretty good. But for Retribution, you're going to want to stick with either Selfless Healer or Sacred Shield. If you're playing in a group, Selfless Healer is really awesome because it'll make your Flash of Light hit pretty decently on your teammates. And after every third judgment, for every judgment, you build a stacking a skill, and once you get 3 of them, you get an instant cast Flash of Light. So that's pretty nice to have, especially when you are PvPing or if you are by yourself. It'll give you an instant heal that's pretty good, and that kind of ties in with a glyph later on. Now, the other skill that you can look at, if you're playing solo and you don't if it's lower level stuff, or even in PvP, I've seen some paladins just look unkillable, and they have Sacred Shield up, and it does give you an absorption per damage, and it is a spammable ability. So it isn't bad. I mean, it's not a bad choice. But for group play, or especially in PvP, you'll probably want to go with Selfless Healer. Now, your level 60 talents, you have Hand of Purity. Not a bad talent to have. It is a good damage reduction for your teammates, or your class, or your dungeon mates, or what have you. But I would like to take Clemency instead. Unbreakable Spirit is another decent one. It just gives you reduction on your lay on hands and your bubble. Not a terrible big deal. probably not an amazing skill to have. I do know some holy paladins will take it in PvE for the 5 minute lay on hands. Uh, but clemency will give you two charges on each one of your hand abilities. So that means casting Hand of Freedom back to back, and that can tie in with another glyph later on. Hand of Sacrifice, Blessing or Hand of Protection, which is cool. You know, you get the 30-second forbearance, so you can cast that basically 30 seconds later. Not a bad deal to have, especially if you're fighting melee mobs or people that don't have any magic attacks. Or you can also hop your healer or another like ranged DPS that cast magic. So don't forget that will put pacification on you, so you're not going to be able to melee. But it's not a terribly bad deal. Level 75 talent, I like to use Holy Avenger, and I have this macroed with my Avenging Wrath and my Trinket. So what that does is that gives me a really large burst up front. It does hit very hard. It is really nice to have, especially if you're a PvPer and you have your 4 piece. That is really nice to have because every time you spend Holy Power, you it increases your damage by 2% per Holy Power spent. So that's a 6% increase, and that just keeps building as you can get that out of the way. So it's pretty nice. Uh, Sanctified Wrath is also not a bad choice. It's not as quite a big a burst as a Holy Avenger, but what this does is it gives you longer period of having your Avenging Wrath up. So longer wings is pretty good, especially when you're fighting a Death Knight that's going to probably AMS you when you get into combat, or when you're fighting a priest that's going to cast pain suppression, or a monk that's going to put his big green bubble on somebody or himself, life cocoon. So it'll help you burst through some of that if you can, and then it'll keep up your damage CD while there's defensive CDs have gone down. Divine Purpose, I used to love this ability because I'm lazy and it's a passive talent, but it's very RNG based. It's sometimes not the best idea to have because sometimes you're going to get all the procs from the world, and other times you may be in a drought and you're just not going to get any procs for a whole fight. So that kind of blows. But Sanctified Wrath and Holy Avenger, those are both pretty good talents. I stick with the Holy Avenger because it is upfront burst, and most of the time, if I am PvPing, my partners are other burst classes, um, so that kind of helps out. For your level 90 talent, Execution Sentence, it did get changed this expansion. Everything front loads, which means it is a dot kind of, but your big burst is going to come at the beginning and then slowly taper down as the spell progresses toward your target, and then also does the same thing as a heal. So if you need to, you can heal yourself with it. It's going to give you a big heal up front, and then a little bit of a hot going toward the end, where it used to be the opposite and it got stronger as it went down, which was cool. But having that big burst up front is pretty nice. Now, Light's Hammer, it's a AE ability. If you're prot, I would see taking this because you can, if you consecrate and your glyph to where the consecrate's going to follow you, that's fantastic. But people tend to sometimes not pay attention in a dungeon, and they will pull other mobs. You can just kind of chuck this over at them and pull that in with you. Also in PvP, if you are one of those weirdos that wants to PvP prot, you can kind of maybe pull out stealthers with that. Holy Prism. Holy Prism isn't a bad spell if you're holy. It does a quick. It's a very short cooldown. It's 20-second cooldown. It does give you a good heal and some decent damage, but overall for Retribution, Execution Sentence does a whole lot more damage. So that's probably going to be what you're going to want to go with. Now, for your level 100 talent, I was really excited to get to 100 when the expansion launched because I was all about empowered seals because it gave me some reminiscence of the old seal dancing, seal swapping back in Burning Crusade. And back when seals only lasted 20 seconds and you had to constantly keep casting, you could do that. And you also had different judgments. Now you just have the one. But seal dancing is really cool, especially for PvE, because you can keep yourself constantly buffed. Each seal that you have gives a different buff. In PvE, if you're not having to move around a lot, I can see you keeping up Truth and Righteousness, is keeping those buffs up because that is a damage increase and a haste increase, which is really cool. In PvP, if you are good enough to pull this off, you can always use 3 seals, or maybe even all 4 if you're really good, but it's a lot of setup. But and then there's Seraphim. I don't know anybody who takes Seraphim. It does cost 5 holy power, and it, I mean it's cool, but it's 5 holy power, so you're wasting a lot of crap just to even build up to it. I don't really know anybody who takes it. I take Final Verdict, as do most of the other Ret Paladins out there, because it is a much larger burst than your Templar's Verdict, and it gives your Templar's Verdict a ranged ability up to 10 yards, and that's really cool, especially when you're trying to chase somebody down or chase something down. Uh, the other thing is, after a Templar's or after a Final Verdict, it will give you a buff to your Divine Storm. So as you're playing Retribution Paladin and you're going through your rotation, you'll get random procs for Divine Storm every time you spend Holy Power. So having done Final Verdict and getting a buff on your Divine Storm at that procs, that's a really nice damaging spell there. And sometimes it can proc off itself, and you can pop like 2 or 3 of these in a row. So that's really cool. And then Exorcism too. That also has a proc. It doesn't do anything. It's just a proc, but it is pretty nice to have a free spell. Um, that's the talents that I have picked. Gear wise, again, I'm just in PvP gear because I don't really PvE very much, but I have enchanted everything for versatility, which seemed to be like the best route to go. My weapon is enchanted with mastery. I did try haste when the expansion first launched because that was what all the Red Paladins used to go for was haste, and that wasn't working out so well. It was kind of cool, I was building a lot of holy power really quick, but it lacked a lot of burst. So I ended up um, going with mastery because that does increase all your magical damage, and since most of your abilities are holy power that are holy magic, that does give you a big boost, and that is really nice. But Red Paladin, we are kind of squishy from time to time, so I ended up taking the versatility because it is not only a damage increase, but it's damage reduction as well. So I took that. That's what most of the Ret Paladins are taking right now for PvP. I don't know incredibly too much about PvE. I would imagine you'd probably at that point take Mastery, but for PvP, that's what I've done. And I follow a couple other Ret Paladins on YouTube. One guy by the name of Savix, amazing PvPer, great PvPer. He does a lot of videos, a lot of duel videos. Um, and then there's another guy named Vanguards who's like just phenomenal. He's amazing. Uh, great player to watch on Twitch. So if you want to check those guys out, that's really cool. Myself, I am nowhere near great or good or anything, but I do get by a little bit, just kind of goofing off. And the rotation's pretty easy. The class is pretty simple. The spec is pretty self-explanatory. That's pretty much it. If you want to get into glyphs real quick, my glyphs, these are pretty much PvP glyphs. I was glyphing for Flash of Light because it increases your next flash of light done to a target within 7 seconds by 10%, which is really nice if you're getting the crap kicked out of you. I have switched over to Hand of Freedom though, because if you can cast 2 freedoms on yourself or your target, which is like a partner, it reduces all movement and parrying effects by 25%. So that's not bad. That's actually pretty cool to have. Templar's Verdict, that's almost a must for either PvE or PvP. After every Templar's Verdict or Final Verdict or Exorcism, if you deal damage with any of that, you have a damage reduction of 10% for 6 seconds. So that's pretty nice to have. And then for PvP, I use Glyph of Burden of Guilt. And what that does, it's just a snare. It snares your target. So a ranged snare is kind of nice, especially when you pair that with Long Arm of the Law. So not only have you snared your target, but you're going to catch up to him pretty quick. So that's a really nice gap closer. Some of the other glyphs you can take that aren't bad. Glyph of Avenging Wrath is pretty decent because it does give you an extra heal when your wings are up, and that's usually when you're either going to get CC'd or bursted the most. Um, Glyph of Divine Protection. Normally, when you bubble wall, you'll get a 40% magical damage reduction. This will split that in half and give you 20 and 20 as far as magical damage reduction and physical damage reduction. So that's not a bad one to have either. I see a lot of paladins take that. And then you have Hand of Sacrifice, which you can sack one of your partners, and instead of redirecting damage back to you, it's just going to not do that. And also, it's not bad too because, well, it's not sometimes a glyph you want to take, especially in PvP. Because if you're sheeped and you have sack on somebody, it won't break it. So you can use this to break CC on yourself sometimes. So those are pretty much the talents that I use. for Retribution. Minor glyphs, I mean, obviously they don't mean anything. If you want to have Righteous Retreat, so you can get a little bit of the old school Bubble Hearth action going on, that's pretty cool. But for the most part, that's pretty much it. Again, this is what works for me. Not that I'm amazing or good even, but it has worked for me pretty decently. Just kind of putzing around to do the occasional dungeon and to do some PvP here and there. Um, Hope you enjoy the video. If you have any suggestions or anything that I might have missed out, please leave a comment. Enjoy, give it a like, thumbs up, please subscribe. Y'all have a great night.